person beside you.
Good evening.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Theodis Pace. I'm the president of the Kankakee County branch of the NACP. So on behalf of the Kankakee Public Library and the officers and members of the Kankakee County branch of the NACP in Kankakee, we'd like to thank our two candidates of the 79th District of the State Representative here in Kankakee, Illinois. During the period of time, Ms. Haas will be doing the opening statement. Each candidate have 1 minute to answer questions. Each have a 2 minutes opening and closing statement. Our panelists for the evening is Ms. Yana Smith, community activist and quite involved with the NACP, Mr. Chris Breach from the Daily Journal, and Mr. Mike Rubel from WKAN.
Valley, actually, but Valley, River Country.
The River Country.
Thank you.
The moderator and the timer will be designated by the NACP. The moderator has the authority in all of the matters of the time limit, meaning that Ms. Haas or Ms. Eve, Mrs. Haas or Mrs. Eve, if you have a question and we feel that you might need extra time, that the moderator will give you the extra time, and also your opponent would also get the same amount of time at either doing that particular question or the next question. Candidates and supporters may not distribute materials before, during, or after the forum. No videotaping or photographing would be allowed except by professional news media and or authorized by the NACP. So as we stated again, we want to thank Mr. Steve Bertrand, the Kankakee Public Library and his staff, and Ms. Heather Bryant, who is the committee chairperson of the Political Action Committee for the NACP. So we're going to start with the opening statement with Ms. Haas, followed by Ms. Eve.
Good evening. I want to thank the NAACP and all involved in this event. I'm pleased to be here tonight. I've had a long and good relationship with many of the leaders of the NAACP over the years through my work with the Helen Wheeler Center. For those of you that I have not had the chance to meet yet, my name is Jackie Haas, and I'm running to serve you in Springfield. As a lifelong resident of Kankakee County, a working mother who is the CEO of a local not-for-profit, and an active member of my community, I recognize the everyday challenges, issues, and opportunities in the 79th District. I have a passion for helping people and will always roll up my sleeves to get the job done. I'm running because, like many of you, I believe Springfield politicians have forgotten about us, the children and families they represent, and have failed to help grow opportunities for Illinoisans. I have dedicated my career to serving our community as a clinical social worker for 3 decades. I have focused on helping underserved populations and advocating for those who cannot speak for themselves. I have developed strong relationships with many diverse sectors in the community, and those are the voices that will come to Springfield with me. I also serve on the Kankakee County Board, which provides me with insight and real involvement in government management and legislative impact. As your representative in Springfield, I will bring collaboration and bipartisan problem-solving perspective in order to produce real change. It's time we repair the foundation of Illinois, one that is built on reform with taxpayers in mind, ending pay increases for Springfield politicians, meaningful ethics reform, and elimination of tax increases that take more money out of your paychecks. We hear a lot of empty words from Springfield politicians, but this is personal for me. I've committed my life to serving others, and I've successfully fought for our community. I won't ever back down, and I will always fight for your voice in Springfield. Thank you, and I hope I earn your support.
Ms. Eve, before you start your 2-minute opening statement, the timer for the evening is Mr. Jess Gathern, Second Vice President of the NACP and Vice President of the Kankakee School District 111. Ms. Eve.
Good evening. I would like to thank Theodis Pace and the NAACP for hosting this forum. Thank you, Theodis. I would also like to thank those in the audience and those watching online for giving their time to become informed voters. I came to this country and community to attend college. While getting my degree from Olivet and Governor State, I tutored at-risk students. After getting my master's, I went to work at Shapiro Center as a social worker. I've worked at Shapiro Center for about 19 years. I'm also an AFSCME Union Steward of Local 29. I have a daughter with my husband, Kenny. I decided to run for state representative because I was concerned about the state of politics and government in our country and in Illinois. My campaign is centered around fairness and equality for everyone. It seems that only those with money and power have their voices heard. I want to be the people's voices for fairness in Springfield. We need to ensure that everyone has access to affordable health care. We need to increase services for mental health abuse and substance abuse issues, and we need to help those having troubles affording prescription drugs. Our area has lacked in economic opportunity and good-paying jobs. We need the state to not overlook the 79th district when improving infrastructure. The gas line slated for Pembroke Township has been in the works for decades and needs to move forward now. Also, the I-57 interchange at Court Street is just starting to move forward and needs to be a higher priority. Our nation and our community have become divided on the issues of criminal justice. I want to bring everyone together to reform the criminal justice system so that all are treated fairly and equally. Everyone needs to have faith in their government. There has been too much corruption at all levels of government. The solution is complete transparency in campaign finance laws. I will support all efforts in ethics reforms if I become your state representative. Once again, I'm thankful for this opportunity to discuss the issues that affect the people in our districts. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have questions coming from our panel, and we're going to start with Ms. Smith, and the question is to Mrs. Eve.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. A question to you is, do you feel that one should be experienced in running for the 79th District House of Representatives? If so, why? If not, why?
Yes, I believe that one should be experienced in politics, not necessarily experienced running for the 79th District, but one should be either an informed voters, or one should be involved in community services and to understand what's going on in the community. I know a lot of people that are serving in office, and they've really done nothing for the community. So really, it's not about how long you serve. It's more about what you're passionate about and if you get the work done. Because some people just keep talking about getting the work done and they never get anything done. They just talk because they want votes. But we need action. And actually, that's why I'm running for your state representative.
Thank you.
Mrs. Haas?
Thank you. I would definitely say that my experience on the county board gives me a good foundation for representing the community in Springfield, as well as being a lifelong resident of Kankakee County. Being born and raised here, I believe that I have a very good understanding of what this community is about, what the needs are, and my longstanding career in the community, my 30-year career working in the community, and the networks and boards of directors that I belong to. I belong to our reentry program, Pledge for Life program, United Way Agency Council, been involved with our local emergency planning, so some very deep involvement on a multitude of different sectors in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Breaches, I have the question, and the question is to Mrs. Haas.
What are the two most pressing issues for Kankakee County?
I think the two biggest issues, if I had to choose right now, definitely would be recovering from the COVID lockdown. I believe that the impact on small business and the economy are incredibly significant right now. And taxes. What we're hearing from our constituents when we talk to our constituents is the impact of taxes are extremely great. We're losing too many people in our community going to other areas. We're losing people from our state to other states. The impact is too great. People are losing too much money in their paychecks. They're being taxed on everything, and folks are tired of being taxed on everything. We're losing people to other communities in other states. So recovery from the COVID impact and taxes would be what I would say.
Ms. Eve.
I also believe that one of the two issues facing the 79th district is also recovering from the COVID impact and reopening businesses while keeping other people safe. Our local business supports the public, and so the state must support businesses with the necessary resources they need to stay open and in a safe way. I also believe that the second issue facing the 79th district is also an increase in mental health and suicide and substance abuse increase. So we also need to try to prevent that or help prevent that and advocate for more funding for mental health services.
Mr. Rubel, and the questions to Ms. Eve.
Once again, good evening. Do you think the state has responded well to the COVID crisis, and what would you change?
I think the state is doing its best to respond to the COVID crisis. Nobody expected this. We are living in uncertain times. But I think the state has tried to mitigate some of the spread of the disease, which is good. What I will do is I will try to help small business. Really, our small businesses they are the ones that are going to really suffer from this COVID-19 crisis. So we need to support our small businesses is what I think we need to do in this COVID-19 crisis. And also support employment, because we need more, people are getting unemployed. So we need to support employment and jobs.
Mrs. Haas.
Sure, thank you. This health crisis has really disrupted our worlds and altered how we function in most every aspect of our daily activities. I recognize that protecting the public's health is really our first priority, but there has been a significant amount of government overreach in the continual executive orders that have put big box stores at a great advantage over our small local businesses, which are really the backbone of our economy and the driving force behind job creation in our communities. And we need to get these businesses back in operation. I fully understand that as a leader, my role is to protect and support those around us. And from the onset of the pandemic, my role as the CEO of an essential business in our community, I've had to create and institute new protocols and procedures to ensure the health and safety of my employees on a daily basis. By following CDC guidelines, health guidelines, we've been able to protect and ensure the health and safety of our team and our clients. We've made changes that have impacted the way we deliver service. It looks a little bit different, but we've also made changes to ensure the safety, the health and safety of our workplace environment.
You both have, in your last response of the question, talked about the pandemic and how it's affected the finance of the state of Illinois. And the state is staring at a $6.2 billion budget shortfall in this fiscal year. What should be done? And be specific, and how would you address that when elected? Ms. Haas.
Well, I don't think that we can depend 100% on federal bailout. We have to really depend on fiscal responsibility, and we have to look at every department statewide, and it may we may have to look at cuts in departments statewide. And historically, in the world that I live in, the industry that I live in, we've always been faced with cuts being made on the backs of the most vulnerable. I appreciate Ms. Eads' comments about having to enhance and support mental health services, and unfortunately, historically, that's where cuts have always been made, is on mental health services, and I don't want to see that happen, but I think we're going to be looking at having to have that impact of fiscal responsibility everywhere in the state's budget and not rely on federal bailout to help us out of this one.
Ms. Eads.
Well, I believe that we should support our small businesses again. We need to give them incentives because it will take quite a few years for them to recover from this COVID-19. And as with cuts in spending, I don't think we should lean towards cuts in spending too much, because every time I turn around, politicians are saying cut, 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 cut. I mean, we need to support social services. This is the time that we need to support social services. So as your state representative, I will fight for fair taxes. We need to, hopefully the fair tax, the progressive tax that is being placed on the ballot will pass. But we absolutely need to support our small businesses. They will be the ones that will bring this economy back together again.
All right, thank you. Ms. Smith, you have a question. The question is to Ms. Aziz.
Ms. Z, in the wake of the death of Mr. George Floyd in Minneapolis, legislators in some states have taken up the issue of police reform. Should Illinois do the same? If so, what would that look like? So basically, what is your platform on police reform?
What happened to George Floyd was, it was so sad. It was just devastating. Yes, Illinois definitely needs to address police reforms, because we do need reforms in law enforcement. Law enforcement, everyone needs law enforcement. We need law enforcement to protect and to serve. But right now, there are problems within the law enforcement agencies which needs change. And I think that as a citizen, as a black person myself, law enforcement does not work for black and brown people right now. It doesn't with certain things, but most people who are black and brown like me encounter problems with law enforcement. So we need to address it. We cannot just push it aside. We can say that we can suppress a movement, but we cannot suppress feelings of years of oppression and feelings of a need for change. This is a need for change. So yes, Illinois has to address policing.
We're going to give Ms. Eve about 35-second timer. Can you indicate what type of legislation or regarding body cams or whatever? So what else would she do to address police reform? And
Okay.
Ms.
Well, I have
Ms.
so
Haas
many.
will get the 30 seconds also.
I have so many things in my mind, but I only have 30 seconds, so I'm going to be quick. Well, the things that we need with police reforms, we need to introduce extensive de-escalation training with law enforcement. That way, they can start to train with what I call community policing versus policing with force. Because that's where the problem comes. The problem from law enforcement comes from when they police with force. So we need to train law enforcement. We also need to restructure the law enforcement agencies so that they can start policing with community-based policing, like having social workers in their law enforcement departments. Even psychologists, they need psychologists, because many people that encounter law enforcement are people who are mentally distressed, and we are so quick to put them in jail. We need real changes in policing and law enforcement to address these issues.
Thank you, Ms. Eve. Ms. Haas,
Sure.
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Certainly, I'm in favor of making changes. I think we're really incredibly blessed in our community to have the public safety and law enforcement professionals we have, because they've been very proactive in partnering and developing relationships with all sectors in our community. And perhaps a lot of folks aren't aware of that. Many people aren't maybe aware of the intense training that some of our law enforcement have gone through. Between public safety personnel on a regular basis. Most of our personnel, public safety personnel have gone through extensive mental health training and, for example, crisis intervention training. We have every department in our county has crisis intervention trained personnel, and that's an extensive 40-hour training on mental health specifically. So every department has a officer on duty who is trained in that, and people can request when there's a mental health crisis that they're observing or involved with for a crisis intervention trained officer to respond to that. And we've done extensive mental health first aid training with our law enforcement personnel as well in our communities. And I know that the NAACP has been extremely involved with advancing the 10 principles and the 8 can't wait with our law enforcement personnel as well. And I think those are great advancements and wonderful things that are moving forward in our community. I'm in complete support of body cameras for public safety personnel for a variety of reasons. I think that protects the victims, the perpetrator, as well as our law enforcement as well.
Mr. Breach, you have the question, and the question is to Mrs. Haas.
What will you do to increase jobs in Kankakee County and the 79th District?
Sure, I think workforce is a big issue for a variety of reasons. That's one thing I think that we struggle with in my industry, having a well-qualified and trained workforce. I think that we certainly need to work with our workforce development in our community, work with our higher education, our colleges, as well as our high schools. We need to make sure that we have our youth are being educated at the high school level, whether it's through our trades, career center, that they're being well trained to advance to whatever that workforce may be. We have a wonderful community college that many of our students take advantage of, but we also need folks that are in the trades. We have jobs that are available in the community that we can't fill because we don't have the workforce that's qualified to train them or to fill those jobs. So we need to make sure that we're getting the workforce trained properly. Thank you.
Mrs. Eve.
I think, Kankakee's natural resources and its proximity to Chicago should be attractive to investors and to companies. We should not overlook the state funding for infrastructure development. We should make sure that we earmark state funding towards the infrastructure development here in the 79th District. And as your state representative, I will do just that. We should make sure that tax incentive zones are used to entice new businesses that will pay for living wage jobs. IDOT is finally starting to move forward on the interchange on Route 17, which is a good thing. This needs to move forward as soon as possible, as it will be an economic engine for the east part of Kankakee. Our community must be ready when the South Suburban Airport becomes a reality, with trained workers and ready sites for related business influx. Along with the development of the airport will come opportunities for good union-paying jobs. So that are a few things that we can do to boost the 79th District.
Mr. Rubel, you have the next question. Is questions to Mrs. Eve.
What is your reaction to the ComEd scandal and its effect on Michael Madigan?
Well, I'm not judge, jury, or executioner, but my take on it is that nobody's above the law. Nobody. No politician is above the law. No elected official is above the law. So if Mike Madigan is indicted, then by all means, he should step down. But nobody is above the law.
Mrs. Haas.
Well, I agree with what Mrs. Eads said, definitely. But I also think that is justification why we need some ethics reform in the state of Illinois, and why I would support term limits. That's definite justification for why we shouldn't have people possess so much power in our state.
Ms. Smith, you have the next question, and questions to Mrs. Haas.
Do you support Black Lives Matter? Why?
Sure, thank you. Are you talking about the organization?
Yeah, just the Black Lives Matter movement, yes.
So I of course, support Black Lives Matter, and I will do everything that I can to make lives matter locally. I'm concerned about doing a job where I can have a positive impact as much as I can for all of those who suffer in our community, and particularly those who suffer from, any type of mental health issues, behavioral health issues, substance use, and are struggling with any disparities in our community. Absolutely.
Ms. Heath?
Mrs. Eve.
Yes, I definitely support Black Lives Matter. I know people say Black Lives Matter is an organization, but there's no president or board for Black Lives Matter. Actually, Black Lives Matter is a movement. And with the Black Lives Matter, I know people are saying, well, all lives matter, but it does not mean the Black Lives Matter movement is not about all lives matter. The Black lives right now is burning up. It's just like when you have a neighborhood, like 10 houses in a neighborhood. When one house is burning up, all the rest of the houses will focus on that burning house. And that's actually what Black Lives Matter is about. Black lives is burning right now, so we are all focusing to make Black lives better. So yes, I do support it.
Thank you. This sort of ties into the last question. It's a question from the audience here. Do you believe systematic racism exists, and do you think it impacts the lives of people in the 7th and 9th District? Mrs. Eve. Yes.
Systematic racism does exist. If you don't walk in a skin like mine, and I'm not saying, but if you are black or brown, you will, at a certain point in your life, encounter some sort of systematic racism. It could be at your job, it could be while you're driving. Some people call it driving while black. But yes, systematic racism does exist, and we as a community need to address systematic racism. We may not be able to eradicate all of racist people. Not everybody's racist. There's so many people who are not racist. So we need to deal with it, because if we don't, it causes poverty. Systematic racism actually causes black on black crime. Systematic racism actually causes gang activities. If we deal with systematic racism, we are dealing directly with black on black crime, and we are dealing directly with gang violence, and we are dealing directly with mass incarceration. So we need to deal with.
Thank you, Ms. Eve. Ms. Haas.
Yes, I agree. I believe it does exist, and my goal, and it's been my goal throughout my career, is to make life better in our community for everyone who lives and resides here. And I think throughout the course of my career here, my goal has been, and I believe I have, is to serve everyone equally, and hopefully that's been the way that I've been able to serve everyone, and will continue to do as your state representative.
So here's a question again from our individuals that's in the audience here that states both of you are educated social workers within the National Association of Social Workers, Code of Ethics. One of the code values is social justice. How would you promote social justice if elected? Ms. Haas.
Sure, thank you. Right, we have a very extensive code of ethics in our profession, and as a licensed clinician, I take that very seriously. And again, I feel that that's something that I've done my entire career and would continue to do, and promote the needs of all of the residents of our district, and represent everyone regardless of race, creed, sex, religion, everyone equally.
Mrs. Eve.
Yes, as a social worker, I do know that social injustices exist. To deal with social injustices, we need to deal with taking care of our poor people, taking care of the disadvantaged, taking care of the disabled. We need to take care of our elderly. That way we can tackle social injustice. We need to create more funding for mental health services. There's so many people that are mentally distressed and cannot even find a psychologist to talk to, and it creates a lot of problems within their homes. So that's one way to deal with social injustices in the community.
Thank you. Mr. Breach, you have the question to Mrs. Eves.
What would you do to attract more people to Kankakee County and the 79th District if elected? Speak louder. You want me to repeat that?
Yes, sir.
What will you do to attract more people to Kankakee County and the 79th District if elected?
For one, I will support the riverfront project that's going on. I think it's a great thing because we need to support businesses, and we need to support the riverfront project. We have a beautiful river that runs through Kankakee, so I will support recreational services for that river that will help with investors coming into the 79th District. So that's one way that I will support investors coming in. Do you need more? Or, and then also, we also encourage outside businesses to come into and also deal with our infrastructure and our roads, especially in Pembroke. Pembroke, the roads there are really bad, so we can deal with the roads in Pembroke too.
Mrs. Haas.
I agree with the riverfront. I think the river is probably one of our greatest resources that we may not take advantage of like other communities do. We now have the state park campground that's open again, which we need to take advantage of as well. I think one of the things that perhaps that we don't think about is when we talk about the industries and some of the bigger businesses that are here is making sure that the folks that are working there are also living here. We're I think losing some of the business, the taxes to the people who are commuting into work but not staying here. So when we think about attracting, we need to think about attracting them back here too. This is a great place to live and raise a family as well. I look around the room and I think about all of us who are here raising and have raised our families, and what was it that brought us back or kept us here. It's a great place to live and raise a family. So we need to think about that population as well. And how can we get businesses back to this community that have either left, or how can we attract them back here as well?
Before Ms. Eve, can we both, we're getting a notification from the individuals in the community asking, can we all speak into the mic so they can actually hear on the live stream? Yes, thank you. Ms. Eves. Okay. Mr. Rubel, you have the next question. The question is to Ms. Haas.
Tell us your position on the fair tax proposal, as it's called. Is it truly fair? Is it good for Illinois?
All right. So I actually don't support the fair tax that's being proposed on the ballot. Illinois currently has a flat tax, which is protected by the Constitution. If Illinois politicians want to raise taxes, they have to raise everyone's taxes equally. That isn't so under the progressive tax. This amendment requires us to vote on a change to our state constitution. The amendment would eliminate the flat tax protection enshrined in the state constitution in favor of a progressive tax system, which makes it easier to raise taxes by letting lawmakers change different rates to different residents based on income, and can also potentially include retirement income. The truth about this fair tax proposal is that you're not voting on a new tax bracket. Your vote will only allow Springfield politicians to create a progressive tax system. As a result, you will basically be asked to trust Springfield, led by Madigan, to not raise your taxes after giving them the ability to raise taxes on any income. Approving this amendment means more tax increases, devastating taxes for our small businesses, and higher spending deficits for the unforeseeable future.
So So, Ms. Haas, you stated, are you in support of the flat tax or to a graduated tax?
I am not in support of the graduated tax.
Okay. So would you support the idea and believe in the middle class taxpayer how can they be protected from future heights?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
I'm just basically asking with your comment, do you support the idea and would you believe that middle class taxpayers can be protected from future heights, future tax hikes?
I'm in support of staying with the flat tax rate that we're at.
Okay. Ms. Eves.
There's a lot of false information going on about the graduated tax rates. I do support the graduated tax rates because look at our economy right now. Our future is uncertain. We don't know what we are going to face this coming year, next year, 2021. So I do support the fair tax because with the fair tax, even though they say the fair tax would raise taxes on retirement taxes, that's not true. They can raise retirement taxes right now. Even though they say the fair tax will give legislatures an opportunity to raise more taxes, they can raise more taxes right now. We don't have to pass the fair tax for them to raise taxes. One thing about the fair tax is that those that make $250,000 or more would see nothing or a little bit of an increase in taxes, and those that make less than 250 will not have their taxes raised. But right now, Illinois has a budget crisis, and we have a flat tax rate of 4.95. And actually, I feel that the flat tax rate of 4.95 on everyone is actually creating more problems with the budget crisis that we have, because the fair tax will bring an estimated amount of $3 billion to the state of Illinois. So I actually think that the flat tax is actually hurting the economy because it's taxing the poorest person to the dollar. If you make $40,000 a year, you're paying the same tax rate as somebody who makes $1 billion a year. So I don't think that the flat tax rate is fair. And right now, with the COVID-19 and everything that's going on with the economy, I do support the fair tax 100%.
So again, the same question that Mrs. Haas was asked. So how would you believe the middle class taxpayer can be protected from any future heights? How would we address that?
I will address that if I go to Springfield, I will support not raising the taxes on middle class families, because middle class families cannot. Right now we have an increase in underemployment. People have to work 3 jobs just to make ends meet. A lot of people work 3 jobs just to make ends meet because everything is rising. Sale prices are rising. Sometimes property taxes are rising. Actually, the fair tax will help with the rising property taxes because when the fair tax passes, the state will be able to pay more on their on education taxes, which property taxes pay for education. So that would help with property taxes if the fair tax passes. Because right now the state is paying up to 30% of taxes in education, which they need to pay up to 50%. So with the fair tax, they can probably fully support funding for education. So yes, I do support the fair tax.
So let's talk about Ms. Smith. Question is to Ms. Eves.
How will you ensure that people are protected from predatory lending and abusive debt collectors?
I would ensure that, I'll probably support any bill to protect that, to protect people from abusive lending and abusive people that abuse loan lending. But yes, I will support any bill on that.
Mrs. Haas.
I would agree with Ms. Eads on that. I think that there are already enough people being taken advantage in those situations, and that there needs to be a little more regulation with that. And I would support any bill that would prohibit that, folks from being taken advantage.
Ms. Haas, mass shooting and gun violence plague America and the city of Kankakee and actually the state of Illinois. What should our lawmakers, and if elected, if anything, how would you address this problem in the 79th district in the state of Illinois?
I think that in our area, we're doing some great things, starting the discussions about what can we do as far as public safety. How can we have to talk and communicate, right? Relationships, we have to build relationships. But I truly believe that the foundation begins with the family structure. Again, it's probably the social worker coming out in me, but we have to come back to our homes, our communities, and rebuilding that safe environment. I think that community policing, getting our law enforcement involved with our community networks is key. Again, some of the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier when we talked a little bit about some of the criminal justice reform, moving forward with those things are things that we have to do as well.
Thank you. Mrs. East?
Well, I think poverty leads to mass shooting, mentally distressed people and people that will end up shooting on that mass scale. So I will address it by encouraging community policing. Like I said before, we need to restructure our law enforcement to community police, because that will help significantly to solve poverty, because when they start to community police, less people would end up in the jail system. So that will significantly solve the problem of one income family household. That will kind of help with the mass shooting. So community policing and encouraging after-school programs with educators, and also to try to reach kids, to try to get kids involved more in after-school programs, especially when they're within the ages of, say, 8 and 12, because that's really where that's really when they develop their ideas and ethics and morals. But yeah, so I'll try to support programs of after-school programs and work with educators, and also, sorry.
Mrs. Haas?
I think I already answered that one.
You did? Mr. Rubo, you have the next question, and it to Mrs. Eve.
Can you tell us what your thoughts are about the upcoming redistricting plans?
I hope it's fair. Sometimes when they draw the maps, it's not fair. I hope that they draw the map fairly, because even like with the 79th district, the way they drew it, it's like it's funny. Like they drew it to favor one party, and I'm against that. So I hope that it's fair.
Mrs. Haas?
So I strongly believe in a fair map process, and not sure that under the current leadership that will happen. Don't believe in gerrymandering. Maps need to be drawn fairly. They need to fairly represent our communities and not based on favoring a particular party. Maps, much like other decisions, should not be left to just one decision-making, or the decision-making of one House leader.
Okay, thank you. Beginning, there's a number of questions that we have, and the time you're going to have 2 minutes, and the question is entail education, immigration, those 2 questions. So what are your thoughts on state of Illinois and locally regarding the immigration and the act that we're dealing with, and also what can Illinois do to improve its education in high schools, and how can we address a progressive formula for funding our education? So let's just, you got 2 minutes to talk about immigration, education.
As far as education, I mean, I think we know that our youth are really one of our biggest investments that we can make in our future. And obviously, we need to make an investment in this. All children should have access to quality education that puts them first. And all children should have access to safe and successful schools. Illinois should work on a bipartisan planning toward a unified goal of adequate public school funding for every school in our district and our state. We need to work together to lessen our overdependence on local property tax and get back to the state's constitutional responsibility of providing the majority of education funding for our public schools. As far as immigration, I think that we need to look at our immigration policies and see how we can, streamline. I know it's a very cumbersome process, but a lot of that's left on the federal level too. So I think that some of those issues are probably better addressed to the folks that are running for federal office, as they would be better addressed with some of the federal policies.
That's actually true regarding our state federal elected officials. So how would you form a relationship, a dialogue with Mrs. Kelly or Durbin regarding how would their policies or your views would have them address how we would, again, deal with the immigration?
Sure.
Such as, what's going on. I mean, I'm just looking at the different questions of Dwayne, ISIS detainees, such as that.
Sure. So I think that much like I've worked in the community and developed relationships, it's all about relationships, right? So as I've developed relationships with other leaders in the community on the state level, I would work with them in that same manner. Take the feedback that we get from our constituents and see what the needs are of our constituents and move those issues forward. My job as your representative is to do what's best in the best interest of our community.
Thank you. Mrs. Eve.
Okay, with education, I believe that we need to work more on trade schools. Not everybody is qualified to graduate from college. There are lots of kids that have other talents besides graduating from college. So we need to put more emphasis on trade schools. That way we can deal with those kids that are unable to graduate from college. And then also we need to support more funding for education. And also support our teachers. They need a lot of support because they are so tired. We ask our teachers to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet, and that gives them less incentives to educate our kids. So we need to support teachers and educators, and also we need to support trade schools. And for the ICE practices here in Kankakee, I am a devout Christian, and I do not believe in the ICE policies. My Christian values does not allow me to support policies that separate families from each other. I believe in family unification, and any policy that separates families is not what I will support in the state of Illinois. And but I'm a devout Christian. I cannot support the ICE policies.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith, you have a question to Mrs. Eves.
What will you do to ensure all immigrants facing deportation get a fair hearing before a judge?
I will support bills that will give them the fair hearing first, because we need to support bills that will give them. Most of them can't pay lawyers, and they can't pay. They don't have the means to pay lawyers. So I will try to support any bill that will give them fair representation before deportation, and that will give them the means to fair representation before deportation, because that's what they lack, is the means of fair representation. Some of them languish in these ICE prisons or ICE institutions. I won't call them prisons, for periods and periods of time. Some of them languish in there for like 3-4 years, and they make a lot of money from them. And to me, that's unfair. So yes, I will support bills that will give them means to fair representation.
I agree that anyone who has been incarcerated for any reason is entitled to fair representation as well.
Mr. Breach, you have the question to Mrs. Haas.
Yes, you mentioned earlier you were in favor of term limits. What would be the number of terms limited for each elected state official?
So since the House and Senate, of course, are on different years of terms, I of course think that it should be on a rotating level. You need to have some years of experience in there. So it shouldn't be everyone leaving at the same time. So I think as far as our seat, I would be looking at perhaps an 8-year, somewhere between the 8 to 12-year span. I think 40 is a little excessive.
Mrs. Eves?
Yes, I absolutely support term limits. I think when you're in office for too long, you tend to, some people, not everybody, tends to be corrupt. So yes, I support term limits. And for state representative, I would say like 6 years, 8 years or 6 years, it's fine. But yes, I support term limits.
Mr. Rubo, you have a question to Mrs. Eves.
Can you tell us about your concern to the long-term effects of cannabis on young people and its availability to them?
I am in support of marijuana or cannabis. I do not believe in making it. I believe in the legalization of marijuana because when we have government intervention with cannabis, when government starts to intervene, it really creates poverty in communities because then people go to jail for cannabis use, and it creates a lot of problems. So I don't believe in government intervention in that. Well, with that, with families and cannabis, I believe in rehabilitation versus government intervention. I believe in the legalization of marijuana. With the kids, we should have programs like addiction programs if people become addicted to marijuana. But I don't believe in government intervention and marijuana use, no.
Mrs. Haas.
So marijuana is still considered a Schedule I drug. Other drugs that are in that Schedule I are heroin, LSD, ecstasy, right? So it's a legal drug in Illinois, so it can be purchased now. I would like to also see the revenues that are brought in by this locked into earmarks to support treatment for substance use and mental health. These industries are already overburdened and severely underfunded. You asked about long-term side effects. Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about long-term side effects. And in my long career in behavioral health, unfortunately, I've seen my fair share of some of those long-term side effects. It affects brain development. It affects thinking. It can impair thinking, memory. It affects how the brain builds connections. It affects your neurotransmitter and receptors. And we know that the brain develops in a person until they're about 25 years old. So the impact on some of those long-term effects are going to be much greater the earlier someone starts using. So significant concerns, yes. Thank you.
Mr. Breach, you have the question. The question is to Mrs. Haas.
How would you work with local organizations to help solve the homelessness problem in the district?
Sure. So that's been something that over the course of my career that I've been involved in quite a bit. So there are many organizations that are involved with trying to have an impact on that. Some of the struggles that have been encountered are, one of the more recent struggles has been that communities don't necessarily want homeless services in their community because of the stigma, the fear of having a homeless shelter in the community. So there's a housing continuum. We work with the Salvation Army, with many other organizations in the community that work with statewide resources, Catholic Charities, Fortitude, of course, to try to meet these needs that are very significant in our community. We have a significant amount of homeless. Many of them do suffer from mental illness, and as I've mentioned, our mental health services have been decimated over the past, 5-10 years, definitely over the 30 years of my career. I've seen state hospitals close that the money is legislatively supposed to be put back into the community, and it hasn't. And I have to stop, sorry.
Mrs. Eves?
I will support any opportunity to house our homeless. I know, like recently, the city had a chance to house the homeless right over here on Schuyler, and they didn't take that chance because they said that investors will not invest if they have a homeless shelter. But I think that actually is a myth. When we have a homeless shelter, we actually help our homeless, and they are not there loitering the streets and begging people for money. So if they're not begging people for money, actually investors will invest in communities that house their homeless. So I think it's just a myth when people say, well, if we have a homeless shelter here, people will not invest. I really think it's a myth. I mean, if you go to places like Chicago and stuff like that, you see the homeless begging the streets. It's unsightly. I'm not going to say it's unsightly, but it says a lot about the community that they don't help their homeless. But we absolutely need to jump at any chance we can get to help our homeless population, and especially a lot of people who are mentally distressed tend to be homeless. Most people are a paycheck away from being homeless. A lot of people, especially in this COVID-19 environment.
Thank you, Ms. Eves. Ms. Smith, you have the question, and the question is to Mrs. Eves.
Do you have any plans on decreasing crime and making our streets safer in terms of gun control? And how can you hold law enforcement accountable for excessive use of force and policing, unlawful policing?
Hold law enforcement accountable. Well, I think that we do need restructuring of law enforcement. We have to address that. We need to, like I said before, we need to restructure law enforcement to train them in de-escalation training versus the use of force. So I think that will help with the policing, and also. I think that will help with the police, and it will help communities. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
No problem. How, just to help decrease the crime to make our streets safer.
To make our streets safer. Mm-hmm. We can also have, like I said, after-school programs, mentoring. I know the state attorney is doing a lot to help with gun safety. So we can help with after-school programming and mentoring kids. We need mentors to mentor the kids, especially in Kankakee County. We have a lot of shootings that is going on in Kankakee County. So we do need mentors to mentor these kids, and also to address the poverty.
Thank you, Ms. Haas.
Sure, thank you. There are quite a few initiatives, I think, that are going on, and we've mentioned a few before, the community policing initiatives and some of the initiatives that are going on between organizations like the NAACP and the local police departments. But there are some really, I think, creative and fun things that are going on, like the United Way community housing projects, where they're embedding homes into communities that are struggling, and they're integrating some services into those homes. And the home on Elm Street in Kankakee is just one of two that they have that they're starting now, and the others in Pembroke. And those are really exciting opportunities. And Kankakee District 111 has a Stop the Violence grant that is another really innovative program that, is teaching all of the teachers about mental health interventions and safe crisis intervention. And, Aaron Clark is working with the kids on robotic cars and just teaching them some of the fundamental things that we take for granted with our own children, but these kids aren't learning at home. And again, getting back to that foundation that I spoke to a little bit earlier.
Thank you. I really, truly like to thank both of the candidates and, again, our panel. I think we could have went through a number of topics. We could have touched a little more on criminal reform, pension debts, opiate abuse, guns, and then environment. At this time, we're going to have the closing statement. We're going to start with you, Mrs. No, I thought it's you, ending with Mrs. Eves.
Sure, thank you. Thank you to the NAACP and those involved in the organizing of this event tonight. Thank you to the moderators and everyone who submitted questions. Thank you also to Mrs. Eads for her participation in tonight's event. As I have often stated, one of the reasons that I have chosen to work in the community as a licensed clinical social worker is because I was raised here by my parents who taught me the value of family, community, volunteerism, and equal opportunities for all. That's why my husband and I chose to raise our children here, the next generation, right here in Kankakee County. My career here has been dedicated to making sure that this is a better place for my family, your families, our neighbors, and our community. I also want to remind everyone the importance of getting out to vote. Remember, this is a privilege. It's our duty to have a say in who runs our government. I hope that after hearing the many issues that we've addressed tonight, that I've made it clear that I'm the best candidate to represent you in Springfield. As you have heard, there are some issues that Mrs. Eads and I see differently, such as the graduated tax issue, and perhaps who will be our next Speaker of the House. When considering these differences, I ask that you choose the person who has committed their life to making this a better place for you, your family, and the next generation. I'm Jackie Haas, and I'm running for the 79th House of Representatives, and I thank you and the community for your support.
Thank you. Mrs. Eves?
Once again, I would like to thank the Kankakee NAACP and the press and participants for making the forum possible. This election is very important. I urge everyone to take part in this election. As you know, Ms. Haas and I have two different opposing views. So I urge everyone to take part in this election in which way and which direction you would like the state of Illinois to go through. If you are going to vote by mail, you do so quickly. You can early vote at the Kankakee County Clerk's office quickly and safely. Regardless of how you vote, your vote will count. Our community, like our country, has gone through a tough period. Too many lives have been lost in our economy and many local businesses have suffered. However, I know that if we all come together, we can defeat this virus and return the jobs that are lost. There is so much work to be done in Springfield to provide affordable health care and economic opportunity to all citizens. As your state representative, and I think I'm the best candidate for your state representative, we must also recognize that in order to provide increased services, we must have a fair and constant revenue. I will not promise increased services for the people of our community and not have a way to pay for them. I will find ways to pay for them. I want to bring fairness to Springfield. We need a fair tax system that does not fall on the poor and the middle class. We have an environment that is very uncertain. We need fairness in the criminal justice system so that justice is not blind. We need fairness in the healthcare system so that healthcare is a right to everyone. Affordable healthcare can be accessed for everyone. We have too many neighbors without healthcare. We have discussed many issues tonight, and I urge you to contact me if you have any questions. You can reach me at voteforcharlene@gmail.com or find me on Facebook. I ask you to vote for me for your state representative so that together we can move our community forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eve. Thank you, Ms. Haas. And we're asking everyone to vote for the candidate.